Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is David. I'm Senior Developer Advocate for OpenSearch. I'm feeling under the weather at the moment, but that is not going to stop our community meeting today. It's Tuesday, January 30th, and we're going to go ahead and just roll right into it. Please introduce yourself before speaking. Hold questions for the end. Cameras are obviously optional. We reserve the right to kick you out if you are being disruptive or unkind. Thankfully, everyone has been very pleasant recently, so we just ask that you respect our presenters who are taking up their time to come here and present to us. We have a couple of announcements. The 212 RC date is February 6th. Make sure to get your changes in before code freeze, which actually I don't have the date for that off the top of my head. However, you can find that. Also, we have a new proposal in the works for proposing how to delay future releases and mostly about the approval process for delaying those. So please make sure to check that out, chime in if you have opinions on this process, because it's very important to know how we actually can say this release will get delayed or not. We had a couple new blogs on the AI and machine learning recap for the last year. This is all the new features that were released into OpenSearch, and then also there's a ton of new progress in the way of performance. We benchmark OpenSearch 1 versus OpenSearch current, and I mean, so it's pretty remarkable how far we've come. So make sure to check that out, see all of these wonderful things. We've got two talks for today, user behavior login with Stavros and Eric. And then also we've got some document feedback at the end with Heather. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over. Oh, let's make sure. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Chris, for posting the links. Links are in the chat for everyone. And with that, I will hand it over to the search professionals. Mr. Eric Pugh from, actually, are you representing yourself today?
No, I'm representing Open Source community member.
Yes, you are. So I hand it over to you all. Thank you.
So
Fantastic.
let me just introduce Eric. So
Yeah.
Eric is at Open Source Connections, and which is a partner of ours. And we have discovered, I mean, I think last year already, we had an RFC out written by Mark Cohen about the importance of uh, collecting user behavior for a variety of applications, both machine learning and just simple old tuning and understanding what your users are doing. We did this because as I was talking to customers last year, customers and users of the software, we discovered that most of them had no good way of tuning the relevance of their results. They were sort of flying blind. They were doing manual tests. Some of them had little scripts that they used to collect some information and analyze it, and they were complaining that they knew that they weren't doing a very good job, and they knew that they wanted a better solution. And they also knew that they wanted something that was in open source, that was not dependent on some vendor collecting the data and keeping it in a vault the way some vendors do. So that's why we partnered with Open Source Connections to think about how to do this in a way that makes sense for everyone. And it's very important to us to get your feedback today to see whether what we're doing makes sense to you, whether we're collecting the right data, we're collecting it the right way, and whether that will be useful to you. So now I'll hand it over to Eric.
So I'm sharing my Miro board because that's how I like to organize my thoughts. So, as Stavros said, right, understanding user behavior is just critical to improving search. And whether you want to do a personalized experience, whether you want to understand the context of a user, right, it's critical. And I think the way that I'm thinking about this project is that we're finally going to be able to give OpenSearch a memory, the ability to understand that a user has typed in a query and they've done some things in reaction to that query. And it'll let us start thinking about, hey, wait a second, if the search, if someone is doing something and we expect them to take a certain action and they're not, and they ask the same question, how can we do something different instead of just always returning the same results to a user, regardless of any feedback loop that they might give us? And I am really excited that potentially, and we'll talk about this in a second, that we're going to be able to start collecting and understanding this data, maybe in near real time, without a massive third-party feedback loop run by separate teams, et cetera, because we have this amazing piece of infrastructure in OpenSearch. So yeah, so thank you, Stavros, for introducing me. I also wanted to introduce my two colleagues. So I don't know, Jeff, do you want to do a quick intro for yourself? Some of you may have met Jeff, but the other week. But yeah, Jeff, please.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hey, everyone. Yeah, I think I met a lot of you either at one of the meetups or maybe in person at OpenSearchCon in 2022. I'm the one who posted the RFC this morning. So if you see that name, that was me. Super excited to get this work and help build this out here in OpenSearch.
Yeah. So yeah, Jeff, thank you, Jeff, very much. And Jason, you want to say a quick word? So.
Word.
So Jason's been, has a deep, I'll give it for you, right? Has a deep background in NLP and data processing, background in working in Solar and Lucene a couple of years ago. And as we start trying to understand what our users trying to accomplish, right? What does it mean? We, going to be picking up some NLP type work in there. So. All right, so RFC. So we've had a couple of discussions about the RFC, and copy link. I'm just going to go ahead and paste this into chat if someone hasn't. Yep. So yeah, as we said, we started with on RFC and this one 4619 that Mark had sort of opened up last year. And then this is an evolution of the RFC. And one thing that we're trying to do is try not to take too many. We're trying to make this decision process and this RFC process as a community effort, right? One that we're all sharing. So this may be a little less mature than maybe some other RFCs that have come out. Thank you, Mark. Other RFCs that you've seen in the open source community. And it's because what we're really looking for is to shape this a little bit together and make sure that this is a solution that's going to work for a lot of people. So, so we dropped the link in there. Here is the RFC. And we are looking to sort of get a lot of feedback over the next 2 to 4 weeks, right? With a goal of delivering this functionality and really having something that our users can use and deploy in production sometime, dare I say, sometime in Q2, right? And definitely something that as people are thinking about their strategies for where they're investing in OpenSearch and what are the capabilities of OpenSearch, something that people can count on in the second half of this year. So here is the RFC, some people, we've done a little bit of looking. There's a really interesting project around Query Insight that, got some good feedback. And I did want to just quickly say that the difference between what we're doing in this user behavior logging and insights and the Query Insights project, Query Insights is really focused on what's happening inside the OpenSearch ecosystem, the OpenSearch engine with a query. What are my performance bottlenecks? What type of fields am I triggering? What kind of, different shards have different performance characteristics? What's going on inside of OpenSearch, right? And really understanding how to optimize those potentially slower, slower queries. What we're really focused on is understanding what our users are doing and that full life cycle from whether it's a web front end, which is what we're focused on initially, but maybe it's an Android application, maybe it's an iPhone application, heck, maybe it's a something like a Roku type TV app, right? Any of those, we want to be able to gather input and feedback from those and correlate them with other events, come back to OpenSearch and be able to have really good sort of out of the box search analytics. And so we're going to probably be maybe a little more opinionated about what we're delivering than, say, a pure, totally generic analytics frameworks that you may have seen out there, right? We're not trying to be Google Analytics, GA4. We're not trying to be a snowplow type product, but we definitely overlap with both of those kinds of products as well, but with a strong search. One of the interesting things about this user behavior logging realm is, as important as it is to understand what the users are doing, what their actions are, what their clicks are, it's also very important for us to understand what they don't do. These are documents they did not engage with. These are documents that they scrolled past and jumped further down. And so there's definitely some interesting nuance on, we have to understand what are people being exposed to, what are they getting impressions of, and what maybe are they not. And then we have to bring that into a seamless whole. So this is the RFC, and definitely looking for feedback and helping us shape it. And this is where we are right now. So let me go ahead and say kind of where we're going and sort of the next immediate, and how can we get more involvement from the community. So, right, you probably all hear this all the time. We'd love more community engagement. So very committed to that. So we definitely want to get more, feedback from different people. We want to talk through the overall architectures we're going to be using, right? There was some discussion about maybe we should be looking at open telemetry as the backbone for our product. Well, let's work through those issues together. How does this pair up or align with some other initiatives in OpenSearch like the Query Insight? So we want to work through those. But one of the things that I wanted to float by people is getting a name for what we've been calling user behavior logging, except logging, well, that's a term that, maybe has been used a lot in search, been used a lot in the OpenSearch community, right? And so maybe we don't want to call it user behavior logging. What do we want to call it? So I've talked to, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Stavros, for time. Mark, right? Talked to a couple of people about potentially, why don't we name this effort together? And so what I'm proposing out there is we're basically going to publish a form to gather some potential names. And just for fun, I went ahead and we did some, brainstorming of potential names of what this might be called. Click crumbs, like breadcrumbs, but we're tracking clicks. I think Jason suggested Floop, the feedback loop, right? So we got a couple of crazy names, but I'd love to get some other names from the community. And so we're going to sort of take a week to publish a form where people can submit names. And then, towards the end of next week, I'll take all the different names, we'll vet them, make sure they're appropriate, right? Alrighty, I'll go ahead and make sure logging McLogface is in there as a candidate. And we'll do some voting for a week. And let's see how we get good turnout and what people say, and if there's some any obvious candidates. And that
Eric, can I throw something in?
Please, Stavros.
I've been thinking about this naming thing. Naming is always hard, and the name is never going to completely describe the product. But I did want to make sure that whatever name we come up with won't be confused with generic solutions, as you mentioned, like Google Analytics and so on. I think that's the biggest thing we want to make clear, that this is specifically about search behavior. And as you said, you want to, for example, keep track of things that were turned to search results that were not clicked on. The other thing you want to make sure you do, which most analytics solutions are not very good at, is actually tracking the original query all the way through to purchase or action or whatever, conversion, so that you can say, oh, this person bought the Parmesan cheese because they originally searched for grating cheese. And so that's an interesting fact, that grating cheese led to Parmesan cheese. So that kind of thing.
Yep. And so we'll we'll gather some names. And then, I was maybe going to lean on a couple of community members like Stavros, maybe you, Chris, to kind of help us look at some of these and make sure that what we're looking at are good names for the voting process. So as open as we can have it, but we also need a good name that drives the OpenSearch project forward. I'll take a pause there. Looks like, thank you. Someone's kind of jumped into this Miro board. That's great. Questions or comments either on the RFC or this idea of coming up with some community-based name for this effort?
Just a real quick reminder, it has to follow the code of conduct as well.
Terrific.
Just to be the stick in the mud for a few minutes.
Oh, that's
exactly a link to the code of conduct, and we have to make sure that we do keep everything appropriate and clean for one another.
No, that's exactly it. So I'll be leaning on you, Chris, to help be the adult supervision room as we go through it. But this will be, I think, a great way. The goal is to maybe get this done, maybe too aggressive, but maybe we could get this done in the next 2 weeks. And then out of that, we anticipate for this project, we will open up a Slack channel in our OpenSearch Slack group, as well as a proper project with issues inside of the GitHub repository. So,
I have a question.
Please.
I'm Amitai from I'm from Logs.io, so I don't have a lot of knowledge in this field. It's like it is kind of foreign to me, the use cases. I'm curious about a few things. First of all, is this supposed to be like inherent to OpenSearch, or is this a product that's being built that is sort of like it doesn't have to be part of OpenSearch? Like it could be, but it just needs the connection, like an integration, in other words.
So, Stavros, you might want to jump in on this. We are looking at, right now in some of our proof of concept work is sort of a plugin, right, that goes into OpenSearch to gather the data and, a plugin sort of for the dashboard to gather the data. However, we've explicitly listed out in our backlog of requirements that while the data may naturally flow into OpenSearch, it could also flow into something else. If someone,
well, that and also it's perfectly fine to use it to instrument something else. You want to go instrument something that's your solar application, no reason you can't do that.
Okay, and it's going to be using it has a state, right? So is it going to be storing that state within OpenSearch, or
no, as Eric said, the backend, so both the backend and the user application are orthogonal to what we're doing. So we will be exploring it in the OpenSearch context because we want to make sure it works properly for OpenSearch. So the backend can be OpenSearch. The application you're instrumenting can be powered by OpenSearch, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay, I was just the only reason I was bringing this up is because within naming conventions, it's if it's inside the project, then whenever we use like acronyms or strange names, they tend to become kind of like a gatekeeping thing. Like nobody really knows what that thing is unless they read the doc.
That I think is a very fair concern, right? Some of the more creative names might not be appropriate because they cover up what it is about. So,
but in this particular case, it is kind of external, and you may want to have it enable it some room to have its own kind of branding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could have a sort of a gatekeepy name, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think that's great feedback, and definitely if you come up with some names, and we should gather that feedback. So, yeah.
So by the way, just to give a little bit of background on this, this is something that, as I mentioned, a lot of customers have asked for, and I think it was a couple of years ago that Eric and I were at a conference, and I said, "Say, Eric, isn't there any sort of standard way of collecting user behavior data that we could take advantage of? And he said, no. I said, well, should we build it? And I said, well, let's try. And here we are 2 years later, actually doing it, because there still isn't any sort of standard way of doing it. And one of the things we're hoping for is that once there is a well-defined schema for this data, the community can build tools on top of it and go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, we can imagine, if this becomes either an unofficial official standard or an official standard, right? If we're successful beyond our wildest dreams, you could imagine that a lot of other components, front end libraries, toolkits start saying, oh, okay, this is a well known standard. We're going to support it. And we get to pick those things up because we do know that the value of these types of things goes up. It's sort of the network effect, right? If the front end knows how to emit events in the right thing, if there's middle tier things all the way to the back end, and then however you want to get that, gain your insights and visualizations, the more well understood the standard is, the more people will build interesting personalization algorithms that leverage this data, or using it to power popularity metrics that you might want to have, those types of machine learning based feedback loops, right? Or even, maybe an innovative front end where, we understand that this user has basically typed the same query in 3 different times and is not happy with their results. And imagine an innovative UI that was like, you seem unhappy. What can I do differently, right? We can imagine a lot of those things that could be built if we have a schema that is fairly well understood and used by a lot of different people. So
one question, I think originally, like, we've talked publicly, privately about this project and where it starts and ends. I think it's right, it's clear that this starts at the client, whatever that client is, right? You're trying to capture things that are happening in the application itself with search results. The end is, there's definitely a stopping point, which is we have the data and you can report on it, you can reuse it. But are you looking at a scope that includes how the reuse happens, or is it just we're going to land the data somewhere?
Yeah. So I think one thing that has come out over the last few weeks as Jason, Jeff, Stavros, and I have been talking about this project is, in some ways, it's the tail wags the dog, in the sense of, what are the visualizations and insights that you're attempting to garner? Okay, what is the data that we need to be able to capture? And is this structure generic enough to be able to capture those structures without being so generic that it's now difficult to adopt, right? So I think that one of the things that we're going to be looking to talk to everybody in both these regular community meetups as well as in the other relevance meetup is, what are the kinds of visualizations and insights? Visualizations are a means to an end. What are the insights that we want to understand about user behavior? What's important? And then make sure that this works, is able to support those requirements to get those insights. And we already, we're kind of putting together sort of what is like the MVP of really basic. I want to know, what are trending queries in the last period of time? Or I want to see queries that don't convert, right? There are some fairly obvious ones that we would probably want to support out of the box with OpenSearch, with a dashboard, so people can get value out of it. But then, yes, as Stavros said, you would hope that it's built in a way where if people have other more innovative things they want to do on top, right, you could start doing that. And yes, we have to figure out how to collect this data in an ethical and appropriate manner.
Yeah. So there is a milestone that is land the data somewhere that's reusable. But there's also, after that, obviously, if you just drop the data somewhere, doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And
Okay.
I think that our thinking on this one has maybe evolved in the direction of, what are you going to use the data for becomes more important. then maybe, and then we figure out what data is that we're landing, right? If we decide that we're never going to look at anything at an individual basis, then maybe we don't store individual metrics. We just update an aggregate metric and discard the individual metrics. I think right now we're going to want to look at those individual ones, so we'll keep that. So I think what are the insights we want is going to drive what is the data that is stored in OpenSearch.
Thanks.
All right. So to kind of wrap this up, right? So next steps, right? I'll be probably this afternoon sharing a link to the document where we're going to be collecting more names. Already got a couple in there. That's great, right? And try and communicate with the community. Chris, I'll be relying on you to keep me honest and make sure I'm following the processes. We will also drop this RFC, looking for some more feedback. And then, I think we want to keep, if keep discussion on the issue, but also, maybe at next week's relevance search meetup, if people want to talk about the RFC directly and kind of dig a little bit deeper. That's Wednesdays at 12 East Coast time. Is that right, Mark?
Yes.
So
yep.
I suspect that we'll be talking about this more at that meetup.
Mm-hmm.
And that's we can record that and share that.
Yeah.
So
this is great. Glad you guys are picking this up. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, Eric, where's the place that we should be looking for that link? Are you going to be posting that personally on LinkedIn, or you communicate it through the community through Chris?
I'm going to put it on Slack. So yeah, I'll put it on our OpenSearch Slack. I'll share it with Chris, and we already have that meetup. I can repost it. We already have that meetup every Wednesday for the, what do we call that? Search applications vertical.
Search. I forget what we call it. I'll post a meeting,
search meetup
link to the meetup here in a second.
I think it'd be good
Awesome.
to also add it as a comment with some parameters in that issue as well. The RFC could be a good place to have a landing spot for this.
Okay. That
Keep
makes
the
sense.
conversation all together in that RFC.
Search backlog and triage meeting. So that's this.
Thanks all.
Thanks. With that, we're going to hand it over to Heather. Heather is our documentation lead and has been doing a ton of awesome stuff with restructuring the doc site, making sure that we have good coverage. So with that, Heather, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, let me share my screen. I wanted to introduce a recent change that we did to the documentation homepage and get some feedback on it. So I want to talk about what drove this change. First of all, there are a few things. So one of the things, this was kind of driven by the data prepper team. The way that our site is set up, it was all versioned under OpenSearch versioning. So that caused some problems with people. Data prepper follows a different versioning sequence. Some of our content doesn't follow a versioning sequence at all. So we wanted to decouple some of these things from our OpenSearch versioning. So Data Prepper kind of drove it, and then we also brought along a couple of these other things to pull them out of the TOC. So this has its own version. I believe they're working on 2.7 right now, and we're working on 2.12. Clients, we don't need to version that at all. We don't need to version benchmark. I think they're on 1 point something of their release. So one of the things we wanted to do was decouple that from the OpenSearch versioning. The other thing, we know that the TOC on OpenSearch has gotten really out of hand. There's a lot here. In the last year and a half that I've been here, and we've sort of built up the team. Now we're back to a smaller team, but we've added a lot of content, and so we know that this has gotten a little out of hand. So we wanted to make sure that people were able to find the data prepper content, benchmark, some of the other major components that are part of OpenSearch. And this is just on the open source side. So we are going to be doing some more to add some getting started content to this. But I really wanted to get your feedback on does this work? We know that we've seen the numbers go up significantly on data prepper clients and benchmarks, so people are finding it a little bit easier. But I want to get your feedback on like, does this work, and what else can we add to the homepage or other improvements that we can make to make things easier to find in our documentation?
Thanks for the Heather. This looks great, and I do like the layout. I think that something that could really help both the users and answer your question about what would additionally be good to have here is a search bar next to the Explore OpenSearch documentation title, and then I could get a different card pop up based on my search. You could gather that data and maybe say, okay, these are the top 5 that people search for. I mean, it doesn't have to be that these are the ones that have different versioning relevant to them, but it could be either user based. I don't know if I'm storing it in my um, browser, like my last searches. It would be really neat to have that because a lot of times I go back to the documentation, scroll and try to figure out where's that last spot that I was at last time when I searched for that thing. If I had like these sort of, if I were caching anything, that would be really helpful.
I like a history.
Yeah, yeah. Most people follow the same documentation lines because they say, "Oh, it's in the documentation," so they'll go back to the website a lot. They're probably reaching the same points like 5, 6 times in a row to research a certain topic until they've implemented or started to get used to using it within their own organization.
Mm.
This is Luca speaking. I have another suggestion. So I noticed that with this split to different categories like OpenSearch, data prepper, clients, blah blah blah. When you are searching, then at least the suggestions that you get, you cannot distinguish which category this link will get you to. So I remember I was searching for something, for some specific terms. I was in OpenSearch and OpenSearch dashboards part, and the result led me to the data prepper. And it took me some time before I realized, hey, I am in a completely different part of the documentation. So yeah, maybe add some visual clue about where the search result will get you, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I know we need to do some work with our search in general. That's something I don't know if we're gonna do something like that internally or have the community help us with that. But we need to upgrade the search across the whole entire site because this actually searches all of the OpenSearch content. If you're talking about Google, Google searches and just kind of understanding where you are. I mean, I think we can probably do some. I know we've been asked this before to have some kind of context. I don't know, maybe it's Stavros, maybe you asked for this, but have some kind of context to where you are once you get there. So yeah, that's something we can look at. What would be maybe I'll ask this since we are going to kick off at getting started kind of I mean, we were looking at starting with ingestion, I think, as our first use case to create a getting started. Are there other things that you guys think might be helpful?
Maybe color differentiation between different types, but that can get tricky. Never mind. I mean, you could like, never mind. That could get pretty messy.
Between different types of
Well, like ingestion, data going in, data going out, having different colors related to these things. Sometimes that can be a bit tricky because some of the components read and insert data. So, what do we do about those?
I think that is a good idea, like some way of differentiating with colors, whether it's API specs or more guide driven documentation, or maybe we can find some sort of like delineator there that we can use coloring to assist with.
But it can be
Yeah.
tricky with colors. Please keep in mind users that are colorblind or something like that. And I personally know users that are completely blind and they need to navigate in documentation like that. It's edge case, but yeah, there are users like that.
Yeah, I was thinking of icons, but yeah, that doesn't help us for accessibility.
Well, for accessibility, if you have a differentiating category, then the the resolver should read that, shouldn't it? From like the metadata. I'm not sure how
I'm not
if
sure.
it works that way, if it really does work that way or not.
Mm.
I was just gonna say there's normally some alt text associated with icons, or you could add alt text that, uh delineates, hey, this is a different color than this other one.
Yeah. Um, there is in the community, let's see. Yeah. In the community, there's a link or there's a post for getting feedback on this. So if you could give us feedback there, or I mean, always you can always put in issues. We have a really small team right now, so we do rely on developers in the community for a lot of our content. So feel free to open issues, PRs, and definitely send us feedback. Get in touch with me at any time. We're constantly working to try to improve the documentation site. So we want to know, how we can improve. So please reach out, let us know. Yeah, I think that's it.
And by the way, if I can interrupt, Heather, um, so someone, Amitai did suggest that we analyze user behavior, and sure enough, we're working with Heather to instrument the documentation site using our user behavior logging. So that is something we're working on, and we're dog fooding it. So we're hoping that will be helpful, and we will have some sort of feedback loop to improve search on the site, which we know is not great today.
Yeah, that's going to be really great. And I think I'm going to vote for Fluke because I think that'll become a household name. All right, thanks. Over to you,
Thank you
Chris.
so much.
Okay.
With that, we're going to open the floor for anyone who has general questions or questions about things that they heard about earlier. I saw one comment that was missed, I think, about the potentially utilizing SS4O, simple schema for observability for the search schema modeling. So yeah, open the floor. Anyone have any thoughts on that question? Using simple schema for modeling search, or any other questions?
Well, since no one else is jumping in, um, I'll about simple schema and so on. We're looking at all the specs that are out there. So we're looking both at the communication protocols, all the stuff. So we're trying to see, should we be using OpenTelemetry? Should we be using SS4O? All of those things are inputs to the process. So definitely looking at those. Thank you. I mean, the goal is to provide something that everyone will agree is just the obvious thing to do. We don't want, and one of the discussions we had with Eric's team was that the goal here is not to build something new. The goal here is to build something useful, and if that means reusing every single component from somewhere else, that's a fine outcome.
Yeah, honestly, I think actually the open telemetry comment was one that I thought that would make a ton of sense in this space, especially as users, might go through several different searches before landing on their final thing. I think that'd be represented really nicely in in an open telemetry stream, but yeah, could be very interesting. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, we'll go ahead and end there. Thank you everyone for coming.
Wait, real quick.
Yeah.
Amitai, do you have today's dad joke?
Oh, I just said it, but it was muted. Hold on. There goes the punchline. Uh, I got two. So I'll start with one, and then I'll tell you the one, and I'll tell you another one, and you have to guess which one ChatGPT gave me. So first one is when life gives you melons, you might be dyslexic. That's the first one.
Nice.
And the other one is how do you organize a space party? You
Go
plan it.
Love that one.
Sorry. Yes.
Oh man, that was great. I feel like the space party was probably ChatGPT.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I think
Awesome.
the play on words with melons, lemons is a bit much for the today's LLMs.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and looking forward to seeing you guys in the next meeting.